What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Just Be Real podcast. I'm your host, Marissa Tong. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode this week. Happy Tuesday if you guys are listening to this or watching this on YouTube on the day that it comes out. Today, we're a little late with the episode, but late to who? Late to who, honey? Okay. I am currently swamped with everything in life. So, yesterday I was going to record the podcast, but I just had other things that I wanted to prioritize. And I also decided to give myself some grace on this whole thing because, I could definitely be that person that's like hard on themselves, like, oh, you didn't get the podcast out on time. But it's like, who cares? Honestly, who cares? And today we're going to talk all about, we are going to sprinkle a little bit of grace, like the topic of grace, but the main topic for today is therapy, healing. I'm going to finally talk about my experience with therapy. I know, like, I've hinted in previous episodes that we're going to talk about therapy and my healing journey and just everything and how I started therapy and when I started therapy and that whole thing. So, today we're going to dive in. We're going to get real about the healing process. We're going to get real about therapy, expectations, stigmas, all that. You guys can actually tune back into the previous episode where I had my girl Lauren on the show, Lauren Walsh. She is a licensed therapist. So we talked a little bit about therapy. We didn't dive in too much. The main topic of that particular episode was talking about dating and relationships and just knowing your worth and all that. So that was a little bit more geared towards, dating, single girls, even men. That's an episode that men could definitely tap into as well. But today we're going to be talking about my personal experience with therapy, how it's been going, how it started, how it's going, and all of that. So let's just be real, y'all. Okay, so I decided to start therapy. Damn, when did I start therapy? I started therapy in 2021. No, I'm lying. I started therapy in 2022. Damn, it's crazy. I don't even know. I want to say 2021. I want to say 2021. It's crazy. I really don't remember, but definitely been in therapy for over a year. And I always knew that I wanted to start therapy, especially like what we experienced, in 2020. I don't even have to, talk about it. I know a lot of people are triggered when we talk about like the pandemic and all that. So we won't go too deep into that. But I think that was like the catalyst for most people to be like, I need to start therapy, or let me seek some help because there's a lot going on right now, right? And it wasn't just whatever was happening during 2020, 2021. I think it was things being brought up to the surface, right? Like that's really what it was. It was things being brought up to the surface, like people, ending relationships, starting new relationships, losing their jobs, taking a job pivot, a career pivot, starting businesses. There was a lot of changes that needed to happen. And if you guys are, into astrology or just all of that, you know that sometimes there are themes in life, right? So every year has a different theme. And for that particular year, the theme was like healing and going through, the uncomfortable. So that being said, that wasn't really a trigger for me to start therapy or a catalyst for me to start therapy. I always knew I wanted to start therapy before the pandemic, right? And for me, it was really just about finding a safe space to express my feelings, to get feedback, to, just, I guess, go deeper and understand like why I was doing the things that I was doing, conversations that needed to be had, uncomfortable conversations. I think therapy has also been a way for me to gain emotional intelligence, right? Emotional awareness, just being very aware of like how I feel, what I need at the moment, if I need space, all of that. Therapy has taught me boundaries, how to have grace with myself, going back to grace, right? Just being patient with yourself and understanding that like I'm just a human. I'm just a human, right? Like, and something that I've been reminding myself and repeating to myself lately is like, I'm not a robot. I'm not a robot. I'm not one of these AI creatures, right? Or whatever you want to call them, like where I could just produce and to just constantly be putting things out that are perfect. And I don't just mean in a work sense, I mean showing up for family, showing up for friends, showing up for myself, right? Like yesterday, I couldn't show up to this podcast because I had other things that I needed to do that were more of a priority to me. And also I just wasn't feeling it. You know, some days you are gonna just not feel it, you know, whatever it is. And I'm sure you guys can relate. Everybody can relate to just having days of not feeling it. So yesterday was just a not feeling it day for me. And I honored that. And I was like, you know what? The pod comes out on Tuesdays. We can record it on Tuesday. It is what it is, honestly. So going back to why I started therapy, little backstory. I am a child of divorce. I don't know if you guys know or if I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but my parents split up when I was about 12 years old. Okay. And prior to them splitting up, you know, just being in a house, like seeing arguments and dealing with tensions and, you know, just like being brought up, first of all, by Caribbean parents. And my dad is only Caribbean. My mom's American, but my dad's from the Caribbean. So if you're someone that is watching this and you have one or two Caribbean parents, you already know. Okay. So that was something that I needed to talk about in therapy, period. Okay. Just like the difference in like just upbringing sometimes, like in comparison to like your other friends who don't have Caribbean parents or don't have immigrant parents, you know? So that was one thing for me, you know, just like family dynamic, dealing with divorce, being a child of divorce. I honestly really wish that I started therapy as a child, and not to sit here and say, first of all, I want to make something very clear. You do not have to have something wrong with you to start therapy. Therapy is not a fixer for people who are broken, okay? Therapy is not a place where you have to come when everything is going wrong in your life, right? Like it's not a quick fix. Therapy is definitely not a quick fix. It's a coping mechanism. It's a tool. It's a healing tool, right? And I think it could be used in an array of different ways depending on who you are, depending on your lifestyle, depending on what you're dealing with, right? Like for me, family and relationships was one of the main reasons why I wanted to start therapy. For someone else, it could be maybe not feeling like they can speak up for themselves. Maybe they're having issues with boundaries. That was also another issue I had with boundaries. Slightly being a people pleaser, slightly over explaining myself to people, right? So, as you go through therapy, things are going to come up at different times in your life, right? That's why, like, I think therapy is just one of those things that you have to stick with for a certain period of time. Now, do I think that I'm going to be in therapy for the rest of my life? I don't know. Like that's not really for me to say at this moment, but I'm riding the wave. I'm enjoying it. I've changed so much, you know, I've learned so much about myself. I've opened up. I think therapy has also been a great tool for me to also show others, you know, ways to heal and express myself in a healthy way. So there's just a lot that comes with therapy, you know, and also like choosing the right therapist makes a difference as well, because you could have someone where they completely like don't understand what you're saying, right? Like they're not really giving you any type of feedback. They're not. And the thing with therapy, I think that you have to understand is like your therapists aren't there to provide solutions for you. That's your job. Okay. Your job is to find solutions and to make changes in your everyday life so that you could live your life, right, in a more healthy way. So your therapist isn't there to fix your life. Okay. Your therapist is not there to give you quick solutions. Okay. And they're not there to give you steps, step by step by step by step. That's your job to figure out, how do I want to live my life? What are the steps that I need to take to feel better? What are the boundaries that I need to put in place? Who do I need to limit interactions with, right? Let's go back a little bit. I'm sorry that this podcast is like all over the place, but I just want to like, I'm going with the flow. Okay. I'm going I'm going with the flow here. So going back to another reason why I started therapy, I was having a lot of like relationship issues. And in my 20s, like I just kept seeing patterns of like dating the same type of guys, dealing with the same type of guy, things always ending the same way, you know what I'm saying? And then there was one particular relationship that really like I'm just going to be very real and vulnerable. It kind of broke me. Okay. It kind of broke me. And if you're someone that is watching this that can relate, where you've been in some type of toxic relationship, or you've been in some type of relationship that took a lot out of you, or you started seeing things about yourself that you didn't like, right? Like we've all been there, whether that's a friendship, whether that's a family dynamic, whether that's a romantic relationship, like we have all been in situations or relationships where we start seeing negative patterns within ourselves, things that we don't like about ourselves. I just saw like I was acting crazy. I'm gonna just be real here. Okay, I was acting crazy. And my best friend, like, she had to check me. She had to check me. So that was definitely one of the reasons, right? Relationships, romantic relationships. That was definitely one thing that I wanted to improve on and just get an outside perspective. And I think that's the beautiful thing about therapy, is having an outside perspective, especially someone with an unbiased opinion, right? Like you could go to your friends, you could go to your family, you could go to your pastor, you could go to your teacher, right? Anybody that you look up to or that you trust, and you could express how you feel and you could tell them the situation, right? You could vent, but that doesn't mean that person is qualified to deal with your situation. Therapists literally study, right? They go to school, they have licenses to deal with certain situations. And again, not saying that every therapist is meant to deal with your situation. So I think like finding the right therapist is very important. I truly got lucky with finding my therapist because she was a referral. So shout out to my friend Christina. Shout out to Christina. She put me onto my therapist because she was already, her family therapist. So it just worked out that way. I knew that I needed a Black therapist, that I wanted a Black therapist. I needed someone who was going to be able to understand me. I think there's just, there could be a disconnect when you are dealing with someone of a different race. There's just certain things that they're not going to understand or see. So for me, I just felt more comfortable having a Black therapist, and it's been great. The things that I've learned in therapy, number one, having grace with yourself, right? We talked about that briefly. And that has helped me, I think, just with everything, but specifically like with career and success, right? Because there could be this pressure if you are someone who runs your business or you're an entrepreneur or anything, like there's going to be this pressure to perform, to show up perfect all the time, right? To have this timeline of things. Okay. So I think therapy has also allowed me a way in which to navigate through entrepreneurship and also have that safe space to go to someone and explain things where maybe my friends who are not entrepreneurs, they wouldn't be able to understand. For me, like my therapist is there for me to talk about things that I don't want to put on my friends, right? Have you ever met someone, and I know you have, I think we all have, who just like vents, right? Who just like puts everything out there on you. They don't ask if it's the right time to talk. They don't ask if you have the capacity to, listen to them. They just blurt their problems out to you, and they just like keep going, and they feel like you're supposed to give them some type of solution or feedback when like that's not your job. Like I don't care, as a friend, like it's really not your job to give your friends solutions. Like yeah, you can listen, but if it's something that I'm not qualified or I have no understanding of, I'm not going to give you feedback. For instance, I'm a single girl. I have a couple friends that are either married, in relationships, about to get married, right? When they come to me and like they're talking about whatever relationship issues they have, I can't really give feedback because I'm not in a relationship. I'm not married. I don't have that experience, right? So like it would be very biased for me to try to give some type of feedback or advice to my friend when like I can't, like I can't relate to that. Like go talk to your therapist, like go get in counseling, couples counseling, marriage counseling, all that. Like that's why therapy is a tool. That's why it's here for us. So it's like taking advantage of that is such a smart move. It's such a good move, and it's only going to benefit you in the end. Another thing that I've learned in therapy is a way to set boundaries. Now, we've talked about this. We've had an episode about boundaries. Okay, we've talked about what boundaries are and what boundaries are not. So you guys can always go back and refer to that episode. We won't get too deep into boundaries in this episode. But yeah, it's taught me to set boundaries, not only with other people, but with myself. with myself. Like boundaries could be something like, girl, get off of your phone like at night. Like you don't need to be scrolling on your phone in bed at 11 p.m., at 12 a.m. Like we don't need to be doing that. So I think setting up boundaries is just realizing what is not working for you and what is working for you, and just trying to find a way to set things in place and systems in place so that you feel at peace with yourself, right? And boundaries are just they're think about them as like little rules that you set up for yourself, right? I'm not going to scroll on my phone past 11 p.m. I'm not going on a date at 11 p.m., right? That could be a boundary. I'm not going to spend more than $300 eating out every week, right? That could be a boundary with yourself. Boundaries with friends could look like, hey, can you give me a call before you come over? Don't just pull up to my house, okay? Don't just be ringing the doorbell. Call me, right? That could be a boundary with friends. Boundary with family could be, and this is something that I'm dealing with right now, is like, don't involve me in these issues, because there's really nothing that I can do to help in this situation. And I think it's very tricky with family. Family is such a freaking crazy sensitive topic, right? And I don't really talk about my family. We've talked about this before. I don't talk about my family. I don't talk about my family issues on here. That's something that is very private and sacred to me. So I'll never come on here and put my family issues on blast or put my family on blast or anything like that. But I think this could probably relate to everybody, where your family can go through things where they try to suck you into it, or you feel guilty because it's your blood, right? It's your family, so you feel like you have to show up for them in a certain way, sometimes being the fixer. For me personally, sometimes I am the fixer, right? I feel like I have to fix things, and that's outside of family as well. But I've struggled with in the past, like having to fix things, having to show up, in a certain way, having to console people, having to make them feel better. Where I've learned now in therapy that like a lot of that isn't my job. That's not my responsibility. And then also through my own spiritual practice, which I've, talked about on this episode as well, not on this episode, on this podcast, that I've, been more on my spiritual journey within the past 2 years. But that's also another thing, just realizing that like we are our creators, our own creators of life, right? We create our reality, we create our situations, we create the things that happen in our lives, whether we want to believe that or not, right? So the actions you take, the words you speak, the things that you do, the ways that you show up, the fire that you feed, like all of that goes into creating your reality. So a reminder for me has been, everybody creates their reality. Everybody's responsible for themselves, especially as an adult. Okay, we're not talking about kids here. Kids is a whole nother thing, right? When you have kids in your family, when you're around kids, maybe if you're a teacher, there's a different responsibility surrounding kids, right? You're more inclined or responsible to guide them in a certain way. But as an adult, it's up to you to do the freaking work. Period. I'm just going to say that. As an adult, it's up to you to do the freaking work. This is why I've created a journal, for not only myself, but for my community, because it's so important for us to have that self-awareness, the emotional intelligence, the drive, the desire to do better, to live a better life, to show up as our best selves, right? Who wants to be sad and frustrated and angry and negative and blaming other people all the time? Like, that's not a good look. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. For me, the main goals in therapy has been finding peace with myself, finding peace in my relationships, finding peace in my choices, in my job, in my career, like choosing to take a big leap of faith last year, like stepping into entrepreneurship full time. That's something that I've had to deal with, as far as like mindset. It's been a lot of mindset work. And I think the part that people are missing sometimes and why they don't want to start therapy is because they don't want to deal with the uncomfortable situations. They don't want to deal with facing maybe the choices that they've made that have not been great. They don't want to deal with facing maybe the fact that their life is a certain way because they've created it, to be that way. They don't want to deal with maybe taking responsibility for the way that their friendships have ended, relationships have ended, the patterns, right? I think the great thing about therapy is that it's a reflection, right? It's kind of like holding a mirror to yourself and having to face yourself. Going back to like the toxic relationship that I was talking about, I was dealing with that for like years and years and years. And honestly, it wasn't like a real committed relationship. It wasn't like this man was my boyfriend, but it didn't even need to be that because it was a lot of back and forth. When you're in that toxic, love or whatever, it's a lot of back and forth and arguing and making up and getting back together and arguing again and cutting each other off and all that. So like when I started talking about it in therapy, it was almost like a mirror was being held up and I was literally watching and hearing myself talk about it. And that honestly, it did not take me long to cut that situation off after I started therapy. I'm so serious. Like just hearing myself talk about it, I would just feel so stupid. Like, what? Why are we even dealing with this? And like, when you talk about something to someone else and they really like aren't feeding the fire or fueling the fire, whatever you want to call it, and they're just like listening, it's kind of like it allows you more mental space or it allows you to hear yourself more clearly, right? So I was hearing myself very clearly when I was talking about the situation. And then I was just like, this sounds crazy. This sounds crazy. So I think the beautiful thing with therapy is like taking yourself out of your situations, right? Whatever situation you're in and putting yourself in a different perspective, right? Like kind of like this outside perspective. Like it's still you talking about it, but you're also still listening to yourself talk about it, right? So, yeah, it's been great. I'm not going to lie, like therapy has also helped me with just like managing stress, on a daily basis. My therapist is someone who encourages self-care, which I love. So, she'll check in and she'll ask me, like, are you doing your yoga? Are you working out? Are you moving your body? Are you journaling? Sometimes she'll have me like read my journal entries to her. Obviously, that's not a requirement. And she'll ask me, like, are you okay with that? So I'll do that every now and then. And that's just a way for her to like understand my mental state at that time or like my thought process or what exactly I'm dealing with, my emotions, right? So that we could address it in a better way or a deeper way. So, therapy is just different for everybody. I can't sit on here and tell you guys to start therapy or that you have to start therapy or that it needs to be a requirement. I think that's a decision that every person needs to make. And again, I don't think talk therapy is for everybody. Even therapists will tell you that, maybe like you need to do something a little bit more like physical, like whether that's trying to heal your nervous system. I think with some people who have anxiety, that's also another reason I had started therapy. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, which I think a lot of us were, during the pandemic. So that was also another reason I had started therapy. But, if you're someone that deals with like high levels of anxiety, it could be something where like you need to reset your nervous system. So talk therapy might not work for you. There's other ways to heal yourself. Reading could be healing, journaling could be healing, prayer could be healing, meditation could be healing. There's so many different ways. So that's why I wanted to wrap up the self-love and confidence series with this topic, because again, this is another way to love yourself, right? To heal yourself. Like, who doesn't want to get better? That's the thing. It's like, who doesn't want to live a better life? Who doesn't want to live a peaceful life? Who doesn't want to be at peace with themselves? Who doesn't want to learn how to cope, right? And to have better ways of navigating through this world and through difficult situations. I think therapy is it's great for that. So I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode and listening to my story about my healing journey. And I also wanted to remind you guys that the self-love and not the self-love, the self-care guide and wellness journals are still available. We still do have some in stock. So go ahead and order and I'll show you guys. We have, I don't know if I ever showed you guys the blue copy, but this is the powder blue. It's a hardcover copy. And then this is our soft touch forest green. So Yeah, if you're a spiral girl or if you're a hardcover girl, go ahead, order your journals now. And I appreciate the support. I appreciate the support of the podcast. I appreciate the support of the YouTube channel, of you guys coming and taking classes if you're in Jersey. I'm so grateful. I'm really, really grateful to have this platform and to come on here and be raw and real and honest with you guys and encourage you guys to just take more control of your life and to just live a better life. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys are listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure you rate and review the podcast. I'd appreciate you so much. This is really just going to help the podcast grow this year. So thank you if you've already rated and reviewed. If you guys are listening or watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Okay, hit that like button because the likes don't be adding up to the views. So please hit the like button. Also, subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed so you get notified whenever we upload new videos, new episodes. And drop a comment. Let me know what you thought about this conversation. Are you in therapy? Are you thinking about starting therapy? What's up? So, yeah, thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your week or day, and I'll see you guys on Friday. Bye.